WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Barbara Moran, you are back.
I am back. I am so excited to talk about radiation in the ocean.
Yes, radiation. Let's do it. My first question for you, Barb, our WBUR climate and environment correspondent. What is a becquerel?
A becquerel is a measurement of radioactivity in water. So there's all kinds of ways to measure radioactivity, and that is the way that I'm using it in this story because we're talking about radiation in water that's going into the ocean.
Yeah.
Some people measure it in Curies, which is named after, Marie Curie, who got cooked from radium and died.
I'm sorry. It's all
Just
right.
saying.
I shouldn't laugh at that.
The history of radiation is fascinating.
Well, all this becquerel talk, right? It's on my mind because you have a story that's kind of a sequel of sorts, or a continuation of your coverage of a company that proposes to dump water that's contaminated with radioactive waste into Cape Cod Bay.
Correct.
So you were on the show previously. Can you take us through that to bring us up to speed for folks who may not be aware of what's going on there?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do a little recap. Okay,
Yeah.
So there used to be a nuclear power plant in Plymouth, Massachusetts, called Pilgrim, like the Pilgrims. It closed down a few years ago and then began a process called decommissioning, because you can't just leave a nuclear power plant there and knock it down because it's full of radioactive stuff. So a company came forward called Holtec. They're based in New Jersey. And they said, we want to decommission this plant. We've never done it before, but we're pretty sure we can do it. We have, some skills in this area, but we could do this in way shorter time than previously done. So most decommissioning of power plants takes 20 or 30 years. And they said they could do it in 8 or 10. And then about a year ago, they come out with this plan of what to do with all this radioactive water. So there's a bunch of radioactive water left in the plant that was used to cool the nuclear fuel rods and do other stuff. There's about 1 million gallons left. And they said, well, we're going to take this water and we're going to clean it up and we're going to dilute it and we're going to dump it into Cape Cod Bay to get rid of it. And everybody said, Yeah? Really? Really? You want to do that?
Is that a good idea?
Yeah. And, okay, to be fair, that this is a way that nuclear power plants get rid of slightly radioactive water. This is a thing that is done, okay? But the way that this is rolled out and the amount of water that we're talking about has kind of got people up in arms and freaked out. Everybody I talk to is opposed to it. I mean, except, of course, the nuclear people, but, fishermen, shell fishermen, politicians, residents of the Cape. So there's been a sort of growing opposition to this. So last time we talked, people had wanted to know what was in the water, this 1 million gallons of water. And Holtec says, yeah, it's radioactive, but don't worry about it. But what they agreed to do was take water samples and get them tested to see exactly what the radioactivity was in it.
And that's why we're here today, right? You're giving us that update.
The results came back. Yep. The state went and took some samples, and the results came back last week. So
Drum roll.
So they send out these results, and it's all these numbers. It's gobbledygook. I don't know what to make of this, right? So I go down to talk to this guy named Ken Bissler at Woods Hole. So Ken Bissler is this guy. He's like my radiation unicorn, right? Because he's an oceanographer, and his specialty is radiation in the ocean. So I took these numbers and I said, Ken, here are the numbers. Can you sort of make sense of them for me, right? And he does some math, and then smart guy math. So he comes back to me the next day and he says, wow. He's like, these numbers are higher than I thought.
Oh.
And I said, oh.
Uh-oh.
And he said, so here's some context. He looked at two specific radioactive elements.
Mm-hmm.
Tritium is one. And he said, okay, the tritium levels are about 1 million times higher than the background levels in the ocean. So what's in there now. And then this other one, cesium, the levels are about 200 million times higher than the background levels in the ocean.
Okay, wait. I got to ask you, what do these chemicals do to the body?
Yeah. Okay, well.
To the human body, I should say.
It's all about, like, dose, right? So this stuff in the nuclear power plant, the stuff that's in there is, like, really concentrated and toxic, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not proposing to dump this stuff straight into the ocean, right? They're going to treat it to get it, like, way down and then dilute it to get it further down, okay? To get the levels further down. So there's a lot of controversy about what these elements might do to people or the environment at the levels that they want to put them out. There's less concern about the impact on humans. There's more concern about what it might do to the ecosystem and marine life, okay?
Right.
And so Ken Bissler, this guy, he said to me, these levels are so high. Like the cesium level is 200 million times higher than the ocean. And even if they treat it and get that down 99%, then they still end up with levels 2 million times higher. Here's how Ken put it together.
But when cesium is 200 million times higher than what's in the ocean, 99% won't cut it. And so they've got a big job ahead. And not only do they have a big job ahead, they have to prove after they've done it that they've brought that cesium down to something where we aren't concerned.
So cesium is this element, it builds up in muscle tissue. So there's a concern that if it gets out there, it doesn't really like float around. It'll sort of clump down in the sediment, get into plants. The fish will eat it. It'll build up in fish tissue. These things can sort of accumulate in the ecosystem over time. And this is what is, concerning. And so Bissler, the oceanographer, is saying we really need to do a lot more research before they go dumping things.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are back. This sounds pretty bad. With that said, there is a plan to treat this water, right?
Correct. Right. So the way they would treat the water is they would put it through various filters and other systems that get the radiation levels down. And then they dilute it. So they would dump it out in batches of I think it's 18,000 gallons that's diluted, almost 1 million gallons of seawater as it's going out over 5 hours, and do this a couple times a week, something like that.
Okay, a little bit at a time, I guess.
But what you just said to me, that this sounds terrible,
yeah.
I said this to the Holtec guy. And I said, what do you say to people who say this sounds terrible? So, okay, here's your answer from the Holtec guy.
Discharge of radiation into the bay is, something that certainly on the face of it sounds like a terrible thing. But this is not harmful. This is not harmful to the ecosystem, and it's certainly not harmful to human beings.
Barb, all right, that kind of reminds me of our last conversation where you asked me what comes to mind when I hear the word radioactive. And basically it was like the word radioactive, our reaction to it may be a little over exaggerated because there's radioactivity all around us. So it kind of sounds like that's what he's saying.
That is what he's saying.
To some degree.
Yeah, and they keep saying, like, I know it sounds scary, everybody's scared, but we know what we're doing, and it's safe, okay? So there can be some disagreement on that, et cetera, but I have almost come around to the point where I think it doesn't matter. Because of the attention this is getting, this is sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, like, folks are worried that whether or not this stuff is safe, whatever you want to call safe, that the perception is so bad that it's going to hurt tourism and it's going to hurt fishing industry and it's going to hurt the shellfish industry, right? Yeah. And this is what I hear from like every single person I talk to down there. Mm-hmm. So I did talk to this one guy, Greg Morris. He owns an oyster farm in Duxbury. And he said pretty much what I hear from everybody.
Would you want to eat something that's tainted? And that's the perception that a lot of people, even now, are saying to me, like, Jesus, Greg, what are you going to do? They're going to dump that. We're not going to want to buy those. We're not going to want to eat those. So the perception right there automatically is going to kill a market that we've developed.
The Holtec guy says, well, we shouldn't make decisions based on perceptions and fear and hysteria. We should make perceptions based on science. I like facts and science and everything, but
don't we all? Yes.
Perception is real. So a couple things are going to happen next. Ken Bissler at Woods Hole and a few other scientists down there, now that they have this information of what exactly is in there, they are going to do some more studies to look at the flow of where this stuff might go in the bay if they dumped it like they're saying, right? Mm-hmm. So you can have a little more sense of what strength this might be at once it gets out there and if it's going to get like clogged up in certain places in the bay or, that kind of thing. Holtec has applied. They can't dump it now, right? Because they don't have the permits. So they've applied for federal and state permits to be able to do it. And those will take probably another 6 to 8 months. So there's a little bit of a downtime before the next, the next craziness happens.
Mm-hmm. And this was also a focus of a U.S. Senate hearing too, right? So
that's correct.
Even like federal lawmakers are paying attention to this. Am I correct?
Yes. There's a lot of attention getting paid to this because this is the first decommissioning that Holtec has done. And they have like 3 or 4 other plants that they are planning to do or starting to do. So everybody's kind of watching Pilgrim to see what happens, right? And it's kind of a national or even maybe international test case, right, for how this goes forward.
And then to add to that, they're putting off their plan to fully decommission the power plant.
So, yes, the other thing that happened last week was that Holtec announced that they are going to delay the completion of the decommissioning for 4 years. And that was kind of a surprise to everybody. Like, nobody saw that coming. And they gave a couple reasons for it. One is that the trust fund, there's this big trust fund of money that they used to decommission it. And it's kind of like didn't do very well because of the economy. And then they also said this whole wastewater thing is, a mess, and that's slowing everything down too. So it's like, I'm starting to wonder if they're thinking like they've bit off a little more than they could chew in this case. Like they're like, these pesky New Englanders sure are a pain in the butt.
All we want to do is just dump a little radioactive wastewater in Cape Cod Bay,
Right. Come on, people. So I feel like there's been missteps on their part, right? Communication missteps that now, have blown into a deep distrust, I would say.
Barbara, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming through to The Common.
As always, thank you for being interested in this. It's kind of like nerdball stuff, so I'm happy that you're interested. Thank you.
We love it over here. We love it. That's WBUR Climate and Environment Correspondent Barbara Moran. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you have any thoughts on dumping radioactive wastewater in Cape Cod Bay, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.